It's unbelievable, man.
Technology.
Oh, God, this in just like the last 5 years. Okay.
We're good? All right, in 3, 2, 1. And welcome everyone to our extremely exclusive interview today with the man behind some of the most recognizable campaigns in the world in advertising. That's Bob Lachky. And Bob, thanks for joining us today here.
Great to be here, David. Thank you.
So we're just going to chat a bit today. Let's find out, tell a little bit about your background and just kind of how you got involved in advertising.
Well, actually, I started in the advertising agency business. I studied to be in advertising, went to University of Illinois in Champaign, and started in the big agency business in Chicago. And I was fortunate enough to land on the Anheuser Busch account working for an older agency that no longer exists. It's evolved into DDB, but it used to be called Needham, Harper & Steers. And so I was working on the McDonald's account, and we lost the business. So no fault of my own, of course.
Of course.
Although I was part of it, yeah. I'd be careful what I say here because people might have the true facts. But, you know, I was really out of a job. And you know, thanks to the great man that ran Needham, Harper & Steers at the time, a man named Keith Reinhardt, who's a giant in the advertising business. It's an aside, but he was responsible for all the great jingles for McDonald's. You deserve a break today, and you're the one, etc. He said we're going to keep everybody on staff because we're in the middle of pitching for a piece of business called Budweiser Light from Anheuser Busch. If we get that, the 70-some people that were at risk will still have a job. Now, I was going to be married in about 2 to 3 weeks when we lost that business, and we won it. And I was fortunate enough to be placed on the Bud Light account. And I worked on that business for 5, 6 years, and I basically became very close with the people at Anheuser Busch. I traveled to St. Louis, you know, once a week for 5, 6 years, got to know everybody intimately. And when an opportunity came to be hired to come to AB, they called me and they said, "Would you be willing to come here?" And there was a couple times where I said, "I don't think I want to leave Chicago. That's where I was from." And I finally got convinced, hey, this is the opportunity of a lifetime. And so I became the Bud Light brand manager, and from there, that's where my career took off, you know, in terms of that's where I started, and then I was able to progress through the ranks from there.
Right, and so you're really the man, though, behind a lot of the most memorable campaigns, and obviously lots of people working on them. We're going to kind of break down how that happened, but what are some of the campaigns that you personally had a big hand in? 'Cause I know it was
you know, actually, because of I was very fortunate because I worked underneath August Busch IV. And August Busch IV, to me, it will always be a dear friend. He's one of my best friends in the world, and he was the greatest mentor and boss that anybody could ever have. I followed August. I was smart enough to realize that I was never really going to be his boss, so I always remembered, you know, let me learn as much from him, even though he was younger. He was very, very wise about the beer business, and he obviously, you know, was predestined to be play a big role in the company. I was fortunate because I worked for him, and he was very good about the creative process. And so I was involved with all the campaigns for the last 20 years. And as August started to ascend up the ladder, he gave me more responsibility. I'd say the first time we did something remarkable together was and I wouldn't call it a campaign as much as it was a campaign within a campaign for Bud Light. And it was the starting of catchphrases. And the first one was, "Yes, I am," you know. "Excuse me, sir, do you have Bud Light in your limousine?" He goes, "Are you Dr. Galowikich?" You know, and that was that was one of the greatest spots we ever did because August and I did it without approval of the system to go get this commercial shot. Before, at that time, you had to run storyboards with 12 frames upstairs to go present them to senior management, which is ludicrous at face value because why are people who aren't real close to the market and the target audience making decisions on what creative we should shoot? And young August recognized that, so he started to take some risks and put me to work on it to say, hey, look, we're not going to run all these ideas upstairs to get approval. They won't get it. And in many cases that was just youthful hubris, you know, we're just thinking we can get away with anything. But that kind of excitement and energy was what made us great. So, "Yes, I am." Then we followed with "I love you, man." Then we jump over to Budweiser, and we were looking at What's Up, and we're looking at Louis the Lizard. And frankly, all of those campaigns or those single ideas became rather ways to do business. And so you know, we never looked at it the way that some traditional advertisers looked at things where, okay, it's January and we need a new campaign. We always looked at evolution. We said, okay, if what's up is starting to burn out, what do we do to leapfrog this idea? How do we take it from here to there where the consumer sees it as a seamless transition, not something like completely new? Like, what are they doing now, you know? But we really got on our game at the beginning, and I'd say it was more the 1994, 95, when we started to hit home runs. We started to go, I love you, man. Yes, I am. Clydesdale's unbridled. Clydesdale's kicking point after touchdown. You know, nobody ever thought in their right mind that we could ever take the Clydesdales off the hitch. I mean, it was like heresy. And when we came out with that spot of the Clydesdales kicking the point after touchdown, it was like your eyes opened up and said, wow, we never really have to do another traditional Clydesdale spot, and we can still deliver the majesty and the grandeur and the history and tradition of this company symbol. And so, you know, I was involved in all those things. Real Men of Genius was a great one.
That's one of my favorites, right there.
Yeah, I mean, and you know,
my favorite campaigns.
And I'm grateful because, you know, people recognize it as a campaign, but it's a radio idea, you know. But it's a campaign, and it's an image for a brand that is the biggest beer brand in the world. And when I started on Bud Light as the brand manager in 1990, I mean, we were a distant, I don't know, third or fourth in the rankings behind Budweiser, Miller Lite, Coors Light. And it was really the power of advertising and marketing that drove the growth of Bud Light. And you know, so the fact that we were able to get find our slot and do it with an attitude and an irreverence, and just like I've never seen that before from a consumer standpoint, I think is proud of. But it's very nebulous. It just kind of moves through the years, you know.
Yeah, and you know, you talked about, you know, earlier that you take kind of a single idea. You know, the Lizard. I know that's one of the most popular ones, or What's Up. Can you maybe talk us through? Because I know a lot of people that are watching at home, they're kind of are interested in seeing Oz, the man behind the curtain, and seeing how does a campaign really evolve, and maybe walk us through one of your favorite stories about how one did.
That's a great question, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk about it. The one that pops into my head is really Louis the Lizard, but you have to back up. It really started with an idea called the Frogs. Now, that was a breakthrough idea because in 1995, I mean, we had hit a home run or two, and again, August is my boss, the 4th, and he's the best. But he was like, we need more, and it's like, it's not a magic hat. You can't pull stuff out of a hat. You have to have a creative team that's you know, thinking ahead of the consumer, and you have to have the guts as an advertiser, as a marketer, to say it's time to move on. No, we can milk this idea a little bit. No, it's time to move on, because you do not ever want to have a consumer get tired of you. I saw that happen with Spuds MacKenzie, because when I started at the brewery, Spuds MacKenzie was an idea that was starting to wear out, and people didn't know how to get their foot off the accelerator, and it basically killed the idea. The idea got so overexposed, and it became not cool anymore. So we said we've learned a little bit from a tremendous idea called Spuds MacKenzie for Bud Light, where I was at the agency when that idea was actually developed. And no, I didn't develop Spuds MacKenzie, other people did, but I managed it as then the brand manager at AB, and you could tell we were going to the well too many times. So you come up to a phenomenon called the Frogs. And that was presented to us as a single storyboard, single idea. And just the way we bought it was a breakthrough for us, because all the guys had, never forget, Dave Swain and Michael Smith were a young creative team duo from Darcy. And Darcy was on the way out. That was the other backdrop that made this difficult. I mean, it had already been determined they were no longer going to carry our business after 75 years. But that was their idea. And that's why I loved August the 4th as a boss so much, because he agreed with me to show our true honesty and integrity. They should be allowed, even though Darcy was losing the business, to produce that idea. It is their idea, and it will live on forever as their idea. And so David and Michael brought in this idea, and it was just a single storyboard frame of a frog, and it was badly drawn too. It was lousy, and it was like, yeah, okay. And then they had voice casting done in Nashville with a guy who just did Budweiser, and then they just popped it on a little tape player, and we're listening. It was funny. It was like, that's funny. And they were like nervous because they were young guys, and said, well, let's go get it done. And let's do it. Let's do it, because it was a one-off. It wasn't a campaign. And so we were buying it just because it kind of tickled our fancy. We thought it was funny. Well, we did it, and it became a phenomenon.
Just quick question on that.
Yeah.
So how does that work? Is there a team? So obviously you have different agencies that you guys work with, and we kind of know how that works. But were they constantly working on new ideas for you, or was it something where you said, "Hey guys, we need a new spot"? You know,
Yeah.
How did that board even get in the room?
Well, but that's a really good question because there's so many tentacles to that answer. Because first of all, remember, it's an agency under pressure. Budweiser's going down in 1995. Bud Light's growing, thank goodness, and we're hitting. We're doing well with Yes I Am and I Love You Man, and we're rocking. But Budweiser doesn't have anything. We're coming out of creative, quite frankly, for Bud that was very boring, typical montage advertising. The cowboy baloney poses and Bud and Bud. It's just like, give me a break. This is lousy. We know it's lousy, and the consumer is reading right through it that Bud looks like an old man's beer. So we're going, guys, we need a new campaign and a new position that captures all the great things about Bud, which is America and tradition and heritage, and how do we get away from this very, just very predictable montage advertising type approach. Yes, at the same time, explore new territory. Well, they bring the two young guys in to just do something zany, and we buy the one-off. We say,